know about y'all, but when you think of dope partnerships, who comes to mind? I know for me, it's like Missy Elliott and Timberland, Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, Guru and DJ Premier, Darkwing Duck and Launchpad McQuack. Those are the homies. Yes. Shout out to the crew. Yes. Your boy and D Roth. Unbeatable duo. But today we're going to talk about a duo that has made a name for themselves in the most wonderful of ways, in my opinion. We talking Nas. We talking Hit-Boy. We talking about career rejuvenation. Come on, we talking. What up, players? Thank you for joining us once again for another edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions here on YouTube. You know who I am. It's your boy, and I'm so happy to join you today to talk about one of my favorite stories in hip-hop over the past 3 years. That is the union of Nas and Hit-Boy, and today we're going to talk about how their 6th album run changed the game, and we're going to rank those albums. So, for those who don't know, it was recently wrapped up, the two trilogies of albums, the King's Disease trilogy and the Magic trilogy, both wrapped up from Nas and Hit-Boy. They called it quits. I can't think of a more consistent run of 6 albums over 3 years, which is mind-blowing to think of, than this union. Here's why this union is so important. Because in 2020, when Nas came back and dropped the first King's Disease album and people were taken aback, you have to remember Nas's place in hip-hop at the time. And for those who are smart among us, most of y'all watching this channel, y'all probably already know, Nas has always been one of the greatest of all time without question. The problem with Nas, though, is that his legacy was always wrapped up in Illmatic, which is an album that was out way long time ago, where this generation of fans have no real connection to it. It'd be like, I don't know, Santa Claus. You hear about him, you never see him, you don't experience him. The connection isn't there for this generation of fans. So in recent years, especially in 2010s and going into the 2020s, a lot of legacy artists had a hard time transitioning. They are trying to bring what worked for them in the previous decades into a brand new social media driven decade with fans who have a different ear for music and fans who have social media at their fingertips, and they're gonna tell you if they don't like your stuff. It was very humbling for a whole generation of artists who were not able to get the foothold that they had when they were cranking out hits on hits on hits just a few years earlier. Now they're getting words like irrelevant tossed in their ear. Nas, in my opinion, had already excelled over the past few decades, because in 2012, I moved him to the top of my list of greatest rapper living today after the Life is Good album. But I was in the minority for that, because y'all know how it is. You're only as good as your last album. And when he dropped the Nasir project with Kanye, which I actually thought was a pretty okay album, the expectations were so high and the product was not met. So again, poor Nas, like so many before him, was left. He fell off. He lost the battle to Jay-Z 20 years ago. A whole lot of foolishness. But I knew the talent was there. All he needed was the right person to get him on the right track. And enter Hit-Boy. Hit-Boy was a perfect partner for Nas because he had two things. He was able to understand Nas's sound and update it without Nas losing himself. This isn't Nas trying to sound like the Migos. He let Nas do Nas. He just kind of updated those beats a little bit. Plus, Hit-Boy already had an in with younger fans because Hit-Boy had produced so much stuff for current artists. It was easier for younger generations to drift over. be a little bit more difficult, where a fan like me would love a Nas and DJ Premier album. If we ever get that album, I would love it, but that's not going to appeal to a generation of fans who have no connection to Primo. They had a connection to Hit-Boy, so they were able to drift in. You've got this elite MC with a great producer, a rejuvenated sound, and now a young fan base willing to give him a chance, and an old head like me who's always going to give him a chance. The results were incredible, and we got a motivated Nas who was cranking out album after album after album, and we're going to talk about those 6 albums right here today, ranking them from best to worst, but there's really no worst. They're all great. Alright, before we dig in and get started, y'all know how it goes. I'll do a little bit of housekeeping. D Roth, put them on game. Do your boys a favor and hit like on this video. We appreciate it greatly. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. There's still a large percentage of y'all from my analytics that watch these videos every time they drop. You haven't hit the subscribe button. Player, it's just like bing. Take just a bing. Just a bing right quick and hit that subscribe button. And of course, once the video is over, please share it with some Nas fans in your life. I know the Nas content on this channel always does well because Nas is that dude. So be sure to share this one as well, and then drop your thoughts in the comments because I'm sure you're gonna have a lot. We're gonna kick it off right here with the album that is at the bottom of the list, but trust me, on a list this great, even when you're number 6, you're still kind of number 1. And yes, coming in at number 6 is the first entry into this double trilogy. I don't know what you call like a 6 album thing. King's Disease 1. So, why is this album ranked so low? Look, player, because it's a list of 6 and something has to be at the bottom. But don't let the ranking fool you, because this album was the one that started it all, and it is great. We saw a rejuvenated Nas kind of working with Hit-Boy for the first time. They would work out some of the kinks later on where they'd be a real well-oiled machine. But even here in 2020, it was easily one of the best albums of the year because Nas just sounds so hungry and fired up. Unlike most of the other albums on this list though, this is the album where he experimented the most with working with younger artists. He does that throughout the series, but maybe not to the level that he does here. And the one reason why it probably is so low on the list for me is because this is the one album that has like a couple songs I just flat out don't like. They just don't work. Some of the partnerships don't mesh as well as you would think. They just kind of oil and water. But overall, this is still a very, very solid project and a great entry point for a young fan who hears about how great Nas is, doesn't really understand what the hype is, and they can jump on an album like this and not feel completely out of place or hear something that sounds dated to their ears. Nas was really getting back into the groove here, and as you'll see later on the list, it only gets better. Coming in at number 5 is Magic Part 2. So Magic 2 has a weird reputation, and I think it took me a while, but I think I figured out why. So this album dropped earlier this year, and in my opinion, it's one of the better albums of the year. Not all the best. I don't even know if it's top 10, maybe low top 10, but it's a very strong album. However, this was the first album in the series. I believe this was number 5 of the 6 to come out. This was the first time that we started to see a little Nas fatigue. I think people were kind of like, okay, all right, we get it. What's going on with these albums? I think that has something to do with kind of the mixed reception. And the second thing that has something to do, and this speaks more to the quality of the album, Magic 1 was so beloved because it was just so gritty. It was almost a return to like the boom bap era. It was so hard hitting. Magic 2 is much more diverse in its production, and I think that the bar that Magic 1 set, people in their mind started thinking, okay, King's Disease, those are the albums, like the more kind of grandiose albums. The Magic series, those are going to be like the gritty, grimy mixtapes, like the Lost Tapes. Nobody said that that was going to happen. That's just kind of what we assumed was going to happen. And when we heard Magic 2 and that wasn't the case, I think people were a little bit thrown off by that. But make no mistake, Magic 2 is not at all a bad album. Office Hours, we got Black Magic. I love Black Magic. There are songs up here that really play with the sounds in a good way. And not everything hits as solid as the albums on some of the later on the list. But for a project in a vacuum in itself, I think it's strong. I just think the expectations of this one hurt it a little bit. And poor Nas, he gets that a lot. People put the bar high when you're the guy that created essentially the best rap album of all time. When you don't come to that level all the time, people turn up their noses. Give Magic 2 a break. I think it's pretty solid. Coming in at number 4 is the finale, Magic 3. The last of the Magic series, the last of the Hit-Boy Nas collective. This album was a little bit better received than Magic 2, and I can understand why. It's a little bit more cohesive, but I think there's also a little bit of nostalgia wrapped up. Well, I guess nostalgia isn't the right word, but a little bit of legacy wrapped up since fans know that this is the last one, and it's kind of embraced a little bit better because of that. Again, I think it's a very good album, and in my opinion, it beats Magic 2 just because of the second half. So the first half of the album is fine, it's good, it's solid. But the second half is when things really pick up. When we hit Speechless 2 and those tracks at the end, 1-800 Nas and Hit, it's such a strong closer, and it feels like Nas really was like, we're wrapping up this historic run. We're gonna make this album as it wraps up kind of serve as the wrapping up of this partnership. You really feel things coming together as this album ends. And to me, I know we talked about 2 being a strong contender in the albums of 2023. This one is really high on the list. Wouldn't say it's number 1 quite yet, but it's probably top 5 for me. A great way to go out, a great way to close the chapter, and it just proves that there's just so much, honestly, still left on the table for these two. If they don't have to do a whole project, but hey, if they want to slide a few Nas and Hit tracks in every once in a while, I think we can get away with it. The chemistry is there. I love what they did with this one. Magic 3 was a great way to go out. Alright, top 3 time, and we are here with number 3 with the original Magic album, Magic 1. Magic was such a surprise because we had gotten King's Disease 1, King's Disease 2, and then just out of nowhere at the end of the year, here's this project called Magic. I was so thrown off. I had already done my albums of the year list and published it for that year, and then at the end of December, Nas just has a random project that pops up. We're like, what? This is the album that really kind of took this whole Nas Hit-Boy partnership to another level, and we learned that, oh, these guys aren't just creating a sequence of albums, they're just hitting us with content in the face. And the thing that I love is it was incredible content. Magic 1 came out of nowhere, and it really hit hard because, as I talked about earlier on, it scratched that itch for so many fans who miss that lost tape sound, just the gritty mixtape late 90s, early 2000 era. And that's what this was. I used to call it mistakenly a mixtape because that's what it felt like. But no, it's a pure album. And I love that he was able to give that side of him and give another sense of his creativity. They went dark, they went heavy, they went in. Some of my favorite Nas songs from this era reside on this project. So great. And even though that subsequent Magics didn't capture that magic because they were able to branch off into different sounds, I think pretty conclusively most fans would say that Magic 1 is the best of the Magics because it just gives so much of what we wanted from the fan base really wanted, that dedicated fan base. Man, I really wish that we did get some more Magic 1-ish stuff on later projects, but hey, there's always time for that. We embrace what we have, and what we got was something special. Alright, we're at the top 2, and coming in at number 2 is King's Disease 3. For some people, this is the apex. This is the best of the series. Clearly, I didn't think so because I had it at number 2. But that doesn't mean this album isn't incredible. It is. I think it will stand out in a discography that's among the best in hip-hop history, in my opinion. To have an album this good, this late in your career, says a lot. And King's Disease 3 is great. The best way to describe this album is the stuff that makes Magic 1 great, mixed with the stuff that made our number 1 album on this list great, put together in an incredible way. We get kind of these sounds that are grandiose and bombastic, and Nas is really embracing his OG role. Plus, we get some introspective stuff, and we get some really just grounded street things. These are the things that make Nas a great MC, and King's Disease 3 flaunts all of that. I know, again, that a lot of people say that when it comes to King's Disease, he did not beat this one. I think he kind of did on another one we're going to talk about. But the reason why this one just resonates is because when you go from a trilogy that gets better with each entry, it just raises your stop. It showed that he was not slowing down. And this era of Nas, whereas we expected him to be, you know, kind of just at cruise control like a lot of y'all favorites, this was a time for him to prove that he could still compete with the best. He was still hungry, and he still had something to say. And, in my opinion, he did it even better on our number 1. And that number 1 album is King's Disease 2. This album is the one where, look, King's Disease 1, Nas was very open. He was very, I don't know, what's the word to say? He was very generous about kind of sharing his space with younger artists. But this is the album where he was able to bring in his contemporaries. We got in the people that, from Eminem to Lauryn Hill, the people that are his peers, and he put them on the level and basically was like, look, y'all, we've raised the game. We're still relevant. We're still here. And I'm going to put you on this profile with me. And you going to rise to the occasion as well. And most of them did. But make no mistake. This is Nas's show. And this is the album where he really was like, okay, we're celebrating 50 years of hip hop coming up. This is our opportunity to be the front and center of that, to lead that movement. And going into that celebration in 2023, it kind of, in my eyes, started here on this album. It's a true celebration of not just hip hop. You got a song called EPMD. Like, this is more than just Nas's story. It's a celebration of hip hop itself. He embraced all of that. He put it here for the world to see. And he proved to both young fans and new that he's still relevant and hip-hop is still relevant. Hip-hop does not have to be defined by whatever is hot in the streets on TikTok today. While that is an important factor, there's a history behind it that needs to be celebrated. There are legends behind it that need to be celebrated. And there are people who are still doing some dope stuff, like young artists like a Hit-Boy, who need to be elevated on that same plane as a legend. This is how you uplift the genre, y'all. It ain't just putting your people on. It's putting the genre on your back. King's Disease 2 did that, in my opinion, better than anything else. I might put this, I'd have to think about it. I know somebody will call me out. You go back to my Nas list and call me out. But this might be, for me, in the top 5 or 6 Nas albums. It's that good. And that is rarefied air when you think about how great his career has been. This King's Disease series has been incredible. But to me, King's Disease 2 reigns above them all. Give that man his crown. Alright, that's it. The top Nas and Hit-Boy collabo albums. I love all 6 of these albums. They are still in rotation. I kid y'all not, because I'm one of the few people that actually still buys physical albums. I just copped King's Disease 2 and 3 last week. Yes, I have the physicals. Support artists by actually buying their music, y'all. Do the thing. Especially great music like this. But this is your turn. Which albums did you like the best? Are you a King's Disease 3 person? You might be. Let me know if that should have been number 1 in the comments. If you got love for King's Disease 2, if you're a Magic guy, if you're somebody who thinks that Magic 2 is underrated like I do, show some love there. Let us know what you think about this historic combo. This edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions is a wrap. Your favorite historic combo, me and D Roth, we out of here. Play on, players.